A quick summary of the chapter called The Curve of the Rational Age and the end of the curve of reason. Now, the first thing is that we are in the rational age. And in the rational age, it is inevitable that we have to question everything and find rational solutions to all the problems of mankind, of collective society. The question is, whose reason? As Sri Aurobindo says, it cannot be the reason of those who are in power, because they will misuse it. It cannot be the reason of the intellectual class, because it will be not understood properly and therefore misapplied. Therefore, it has to be the reason of each and everyone who is capable of reasoning, which, let us say, is now accepted at the age of 18. So, it has to be the reason of each and everyone. Now, the reason of each and everyone means that evidently in all the details everybody cannot be questioned. Therefore, there has to be a representative group who is elected by the people. And this is the basis of individualistic democracy. So, individualistic democracy is essentially the principle of applying the collective reason to all the details of life. Now, it is here that Sri Aurobindo says, unfortunately, it fails for three reasons. One is a large number of people are not yet capable of reasoning. Two is that even those who are capable of reasoning reason according to their likes, dislikes, interests, prejudices, etc., etc. And thirdly, those who are reasonable and have got the power of reason try to enforce their reason on everybody else, which leads ultimately to a fiercely competitive society, which does not lead to the victory of the best, but the most fortunate, the most aggressive, and etc., etc. So what is the solution to this problem? Sri Aurobindo says, a good education, a good universal rational education. Now he defines rational education as three things: capacity of observation, capacity of intelligent understanding, and capacity of implementing what you have understood. So he calls it capacity of observation, capacity of intelligence, and capacity of high action. That means, so you take, for example, a doctor. When you go to the doctor with an illness, the first thing he has to observe you, find out everything, and then use his intelligence to diagnose you. Thirdly, he will give you advice which you have to follow. And as Sri Aurobindo says, that unfortunately in no country in the world is this education being given. But even if such an education were given, still there are a few other things that will completely sabotage the whole thing. That is because man is still somewhat of an infrarational being. And all men seek for three things. One is power, one is the reward of one's faculties, and one is the satisfaction of one's desires. All human beings have got this in more or less varying degrees. In the older societies, you could fulfill these depending on your birth, strata of society, how much money you had, etc., etc. But in the modern times, since the ideal of freedom and equality are abroad, and the whole structure of society has changed. The whole movement is you can satisfy these things only by acquiring one thing, that is called wealth.
It's called what?
Wealth. W-E-A-L-T-H. Now, this results in a fierce competition for wealth, which leads to a ferociously competitive society in which it is not the best who triumph, but the most aggressive or the most fortunate, etc. Inevitably, this leads to the failure of the rational society. But reason cannot stop there. Reason has to question why, after giving man freedom to use his reason, this has resulted in a huge inequality. You can see the problem of the world today. Every country in the world is suffering from massive inequality. So the reason tries to find out why it is so. And they discover that this is so because there is unequal distribution of property. By property, I mean wealth and assets. So there are some people who are extremely rich, there are others who are less rich, there are others who are poor, and some are miserably poor. So now, what is the solution to this? As long as there is private property, according to reason, these gaps will remain. Therefore, this inequality of property and wealth has to be reduced or even eliminated. Now, there are two ways of doing it. One is to distribute the assets, which is absolutely impossible. Another is that all property belongs and is being owned by the people themselves. And the people themselves means by the state, because the state is a representative of the people. So as a result of this, born the idea of socialism, where in the process of bringing about equality, they reduce your liberty first, and if it is carried to its logical conclusion, they eliminate liberty. Then you have to serve the state, and it is the state alone that will decide everything. Now this, Sri Aurobindo says, whatever it's... So this has got two forms. One is called socialism, and when it is carried to its logical end, it becomes communism. So today most societies in the world have made a combination of these: democratic socialist or socialistic democracy. And it has worked up to a certain point. But as Sri Aurobindo says, that it will not work really successfully. Because two reasons. One is that man needs freedom to grow. If that freedom is suppressed beyond a certain point, it becomes a very serious drawback. And if too much freedom is given, then there is a great deal of inequality and misuse of that freedom. So it is there that Sri Aurobindo says that it happens because, and this is the most important point, is that reason is not the highest instrument of knowledge. Therefore, we will have to inevitably move beyond reason. This attempt to move beyond reason takes the form of what is called anarchism. So, there are two types of anarchism. Sri Aurobindo will add a third. There is the anarchism which leads to lawlessness, where everyone does what's right, and there is complete misuse of freedom. The result is what is normally understood by anarchy, a very bad society, not a happy society. But the intellectuals, the reason of man, believe that there is another anarchism, which they call the intellectual anarchism, where you appeal to two things. One is the higher reason of man, give them freedom, but let everyone live in his higher reason. And the second thing is that the natural sympathy of the heart for all human beings. Unfortunately, as Shravinda says, that most people do not live in their higher being, higher mental being, and unfortunately also the heart is not a place where there is harmony and peace, but in fact it is often of conflict, of jealousy, of aggression, etc. So Sri Aurobindo says that there is only one way, that is, we have to go beyond reason, find another principle, human being, both individually and collectively. And as he says, in the present state of the world, it is hardly possible for the mass to go to that higher plane. But as Sri Aurobindo says, if this is not the solution, then there is no solution. Now it is very nice, but the fact is that we cannot start with society. We have to start with the individual. Each one himself personally has to rise to a higher level, to a higher state of consciousness, and first guide his own individual life, and then inevitably it will have an impact on the rest of the society. But probably the first thing that we can do now, the first thing that we can demand now, is that those who are in authority and taking decisions for the rest of the society, right, if they were at a higher level of society, it would certainly have an impact on the society itself. I think that is the maximum that we can demand the human race at this time, because we are not yet in a position where man, so he brings in the concept of what we may call the spiritual society. There's a dog that barks there behind, right? I don't know from where. Anyway, now I will just give you the introduction of the fourth chapter, of the last four chapters. That is the spiritual aim and life. He says that there is a big difference, or there are two major points of difference between what we call the normal society and what we call the spiritual society. Now, in the normal society, man is driven by the gregarious instinct. The gregarious instinct is the instinct in which man tries to meet others, to talk others, to come in contact with others. That is how we form our friendships. That is how we form our... I will read out that paragraph and then we shall see. You go to page 222. I'll read out the first paragraph. Right? He says, a society founded upon spirituality will differ in two essential points from the normal human society, which begins from and ends with the lower nature. The normal human society starts from the gregarious instinct, modified by diversity and possible antagonism of interests. So we come together, and there is a diversity of interests, and there is also an antagonism of interests. from an association and clash of egos, from a meeting, combination, conflict of ideas, tendencies, and principles. This is the first starting move point for a society. Now, since there are antagonism of interests, clash of egos, right, it tries first to patch up an accommodation of converging interests and a treaty of peace between discords, founded on a series of implied contracts, natural or necessary adjustments, which become customs of the aggregate life, and to these contracts as they develop, it gives the name of social law. This is the crucial thing that you have to understand. All social laws start like this. The gregarious instinct brings us together. There is a diversity and a clash of interests. There is a clash of egos. So we try to find a treaty between these. This creates a contract, and this contract becomes social law. So take the example of marriage. That is exactly how it happened. Because there is a clash of interest and there is an attraction also. So you have to regulate it and put it to a certain point. You make a contract, because every marriage is nothing else but a contract, right? And this becomes a social law. The next point is very important. By establishing as against the interests which lead to conflict, the interests which call for association and mutual assistance, it creates or stimulates sympathies and habits of helpfulness that give a psychological support and sanction to its mechanism of law, custom, and contract. Okay, now I'll give you a practical example. When Auroville was started in 1968, one of the first things that mother said was that in Auroville there will be no marriage. Men can live with women according to their choice and leave according to their interest as and when they want. And Champakalji was there standing with mother, told her immediately that, "Mother, what are you doing? You are going to create a terrible society. And what about the children?" Mother said, "Auroville will take care of the children." But within a year, mother had to withdraw this statement. You see, so now we have created a society where marriage is a bondage. Marriage is also sometimes a means of fulfilling oneself, right? Now this is, I don't know whether society is ready to get rid of these social institutions. Because if you get rid of these social institutions, there might be more problems. But since when you weigh in the balance whether the advantages are greater or the disadvantages are greater, you will find that the majority of us will say that let us continue the social law. More or less, might be slightly modified, but right, it is not a psychological thing, but it is something that is based upon law. So the last sentence says very clearly, a good many losses have indeed to be written off as against these gains, but those are to be accepted as the price we must pay for civilization. And again, you can take up the example of marriage. You'll find there are hundreds and thousands of marriages where a few years after marriage they are miserable and unhappy. But because of the social pressure, they have to somehow survive. Of course, there are many countries and many parts of the world today where these things are being broken. So every social law, you take up any other case, and you will find is based on this, right? So this is a major problem that is coming up today. Should society ban pornography? Should society ban child pornography? Should society ban smoking because it will injurious to your health, etc., etc.? So big discussion going on all this, right? But every social law is based on this conflict and antagonism of interests. At the same time, also there is a commonality of interests. So the spiritual society, on the contrary, will not be based on this gregarious instinct. I'll give you an example again. When the ashram was started in the early years, social interaction was reduced to the absolute minimum. Many sadhaks, in fact almost all the sadhaks, if they were invited by somebody for a party or for a cup of tea even, they had to ask Sri Aurobindo and their mother their permission. In work, you have to interact. So that is all right. There also there can be problems and conflicts and agreements. But what mother wanted was that you should associate with others only because it helps you spiritually. That which does not help you spiritually or pulls you down, you must keep away from them, like you keep away from smallpox. As strong a word as this, right? But in normal society, that is not the thing. The point is that one continues. But in a spiritual society, the only reason for social interaction is that it raises the level of your consciousness higher and higher. So this is the first difference between a normal society and a spiritual society. The second difference is that the normal society treats man essentially as a physical, vital, and mental being. Theoretically, we say that yes, every man has got a soul, but it is only theoretical. Practically, we deal with the physical, the vital, and the mental being. Because that is the only term of existence with which we have some competence. So we create a system of mental growth and efficiency, an intellectual, aesthetic, and moral culture. It evolves the vital side of human life, huge, ever-growing economic efficiency and vital enjoyment, and the system becomes more and more rich, cumbrous, and complex as civilization develops. Look at the whole world today. The more you are developed, the more this is happening. Now what happens? Depressing by its mental and vital overgrowth. The natural vigor of the physical and animal man tries to set the balance right by the physical culture, a cumbrous science of habits and remedies, intended to cure the ills it has created, and as much amelioration as it can manage of the artificial forms of things that are necessary to the social system. Today, the number of diseases that have afflicted human society is a few thousand times more than what was there in the, say, the African society or the earlier societies. Life has become so complex, it has become so overburdened, right, by its mental and vital overgrowth, that it completely disbalances the physical growth. This is extremely important to understand that this balance of life, where either the mental is dominant or the vital is dominant, right, or even if the physical is dominant at the cost of the others, it will inevitably tell the system that there is something seriously wrong. So you see what he says. In the end, however, experience shows that society tends to die by its own development. A sure sign that there is some radical defect in its system. Now, is it not visible today that society is dying by its own development? Look at the climate change that is taking place. The climate change is not a natural phenomenon. It has been created by human beings in their drive for greed, for having more and more at the cost of nature. And today man has realized that. or has begun to realize that. Right? So he says that this is a very clear sign, a sure sign, that there is some radical defect in its system, a certain proof that its idea of man and its method of development do not correspond at all to the reality of the human being and to the aim of life which that reality imposes. See, now here I come back to fundamental questions. What is the aim of life? If the aim of life is vital enjoyment, possession, and desire, it is inevitable that this thing will happen. It will create a huge economic disbalance in nature. So today man is trying, the United Nations is trying, all the international fora, there is a very clear attempt. But I would like to say one point here, that ecology is not merely the disbalance of nature as we understand. It is the disbalance of the human inner nature. Because there is a strong vital desire, because there is a desire to possess and dominate, etc., 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 at the cost of every other thing, right? There is an ecological imbalance inside the human being. And because this ecological imbalance is there inside the human being, it manifests itself as the ecological imbalance in nature itself. That is why people go to the Himalayas and cut hundreds and thousands of trees, because they can make money out of the tree. As a result, floods, complete drenching of the whole thing below, right? And etc., 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 etc. So there is therefore what he says, which I will take up next time, and there a radical defect somewhere in the process of human civilization. But where is its seat? By what issue shall we come out of the perpetual cycle of failure? This will be discussed next time. I would like you to think of this, right? Because ultimately it has to start with the human individual. What is the aim of your life? If the aim of life is more and more exploitation to satisfy one's desires, inevitably you are going to come into this. So you see, Sri Aurobindo's solution is not merely creating systems by which we don't stop exploiting nature, but create a method by which the ecological inner imbalance is corrected. And that we'll take up in the next chapter. And he will suggest that the only way to do this is by spiritualizing first the individual and then the society. But then the question comes, what exactly do you mean by spiritualizing? That we will discuss next time. The 3 chapters after that, one is the necessity of spiritual transformation. The next one is conditions for the coming of the spiritual age. And the last one is the advent of the spiritual age. Now these belong on a much higher plane than most of us are, but it will be useful to understand them at least intellectually, and for those who are serious in their pursuit of their inner life, right? You will get a lot of hints which are of great use, and also it will expose us to the deeper inner reality, which is very, very important in making one's own progress. So this is basically the thing that I wanted to give you today. And then, as I said, it will take not more than 2 or 3 periods to finish this book. If you like, I can give you once more a complete summary of the whole book, where you can note down the points, because it will be very useful when you reread the book. And then you have to decide together whether we will continue this class with another book or we stop. And if we decide to continue, which is that book that we would like to take up? Could it be the ideal of human unity? Could it be war and self-determination? Or could it be the foundations of Indian culture? So I come back to see you now. Tell me. Oh, Paras is there today. Hello, Paras. I want to thank Paras for that superb video that he has made of the homage of Sri Aurobindo. Only I would like it to be, the print is a bit too small, especially for people like me who are getting old and their eyesight is getting weaker. But I think it is true even of many young people. Although I've got a lot of very good feedback, but if it can be, brought up to a slightly bigger size, and as Kavita told me that she wants to do it not printed but handwritten. And that will be beautiful because that was exactly how the original exhibition was. So Donna, now it is up to you, all of you. If you have any questions, any remarks, anything to say, just go ahead. Martha, have you any question?
Oh, not now, thank you.
Donna, your mic is not on, so now you can.
As far as the next book to take up,
As far as
you said the human cycle, or you said one other book in between that and the Indian culture. What was that other book? Self-determination?
The ideal of human unity. There is a book called War and Self-Determination. It is small, about 9 or 10 essays, right? Written at slightly different times, but there is a continuity in the whole idea. And the foundations of Indian culture.
Which of those books do you think would be the most valuable to spend our time on?
Oh, that is not for me to think. You have to feel whether you would like to understand the political processes that is going on today in the world, right? And we will not go into very great detail because there is a lot of history which many of you will not be familiar with, right? So that is one book. Self-determination has become a very important idea today. Everywhere in the world you believe both in individual and collective self-determination, right? But one has to be very careful in applying these ideas both on the individual and the collective level. And a huge amount of politics is involved in this self-determination. The foundation of Indian culture is a very interesting book, but as Sri Aurobindo himself says that if he had to rewrite it all over again, he would eliminate a very large number, because this book was written in reply to a very serious criticism of Indian culture, which was politically oriented by a gentleman called William Archer. He was paid to write a book against India to show that India was not fit to be free, uncivilized, barbaric. And well, he did his job quite thoroughly. And well, he has given a very damning picture of India. But the problem now, and even when he wrote, Sri Aurobindo wrote, the problem is no more the Western, it is the Indians themselves. We do not at all understand our culture. And in one of the chapters in that book, he says, educated India, educated without an atom of culture. Very strong. You see, now, for Indians, it is extremely desirable that you understand your own culture very well. So there are 3 or 4 big sections. One is a rationalistic critique of Indian culture, purely from the point of view of reason. There are 5 or 6 chapters how he looks at Indian culture. Then there is religion and spirituality. 4 chapters or 5 chapters on the true in spiritual religion of India. He speaks of the Vedas, speaks of the Upanishads, and he speaks of the later yoga system, etc., etc. Then there is a whole chapter series on Indian art, one chapter on Indian architecture, both creating and appreciating Indian architecture. Next chapter on Indian sculpture, another chapter on Indian painting, and the first chapter is a general overview of Indian art, and that is 4 chapters. Then there are 5 chapters on Indian literature. The first 3 chapters are on the Vedas, the Upanishads, and the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, the epics. Sri Aurobindo speaks very, very highly of these, and naturally the Sanskrit language. And then afterwards is the regional literature and its development. He speaks about that also. And finally there are 4 chapters on Indian polity, the political system. And he will show you that the Indian political system in ancient India was extremely highly evolved. In fact, far superior to what is called today democracy, right? The modern democratic socialistic system, we had evolved a kind of system which unfortunately did not evolve sufficiently because at that time societies were much smaller. But Sri Aurobindo is categorical even today that the basic principles of that society have to be restructured. And about Indian parliamentary democracy, he says there is no chance of its success. We always take up what the West is throwing away, and we can see the terrible misery that is happening in India today. And that has been seen in the last 15 days. Anybody who has been watching Parliament will see the tragedy of this system. So I think we have to reach a greater point of suffering before we can come to a search, right? That will take its own course. And finally, there is one chapter which I think is one of the most important chapters, Indian culture and external influence. And it was written in 1919 or 20. External influence, Western influence, all other influences are completely changing the mindset of the Indian people. So they've got a whole chapter on that. What should we do? Close all contact with the world? Absolutely impossible. And not only impossible, not even desirable. Yet, if that influence comes, you will find that today half the Indian youth know nothing of India, are even ashamed of being Indians. Now this is another tragedy. So he works out, he gives us the solution there. What are the things that can be done? So, in its own way, it's a very important book, especially for Indians, and I think for everybody who really wants to know and understand India. Otherwise, you have a vague feeling that there is something very beautiful there. I mean, those who have got a spiritual aspiration. And the others think, oh my God, it is one of the dirtiest countries in the world, which is also partly true, right? And that is why Narendra Modi is trying to have something called Swachh Bharat, cleaning up the country, getting toilets for girls and all that, which is very important. But at the same time, the higher element is also as important. And that is, so now you have to decide, you have got time, first of all, whether you want to continue. And secondly, if you want to continue, which book would you like to have? Oh, Rishikesh has joined.
Sorry, sir, I'm late.
So you would like to continue this kind of study?
Yes.
Yes, sir. Sure.
Yeah, good. Okay. So at least one yes. Donna has already said yes to me. So, anything else, or we stop for today?
I think that we're at a stopping point. I'll send out a letter and ask what book would we like to continue in, and we'll get some feedback.
First of all, whether they would like to continue.
Yeah, definitely we should continue.
So, there are two at least who say that we should like to continue. I do not know what Martha is saying. Anyway, we'll see.
Of course we shall continue. Of course.
Okay, done. Right. So that's all right. Even if three are there, I don't mind. It doesn't matter at all. Right.
Now, one more thing, as you said earlier, we should
Yeah.
continue into the few chapters of the human unity also, world unity.
You decide among yourselves which one we'll start with.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? But that is also very important, especially the later
Yes.
chapter where it speaks about the United Nations, the League of Nations, then the United Nations, its limitations and how it can be improved, right? Because whether we like it or not, the United Nations is a very important organization. And it is not quite satisfactory as yet. That doesn't matter. At least the direction is right. Right? So he
Yeah.
has given very clear hints. So we can do, you decide among yourselves, right?
Kitsuda Paras said that we should continue for sure.
Okay, and then should we continue? And then you, for the book, you decide among yourselves, right? And as you suggested that these recordings of these classes, you are planning to put them up on Twitter.
Great.
Yeah, it's all right because I think, as you said, many politicians also will read all this. And well, I got a message just now saying that we might be take up volume 13 on education by the mother. That's also very. There I can give you a lot of things because I was on the ringside seat almost, so to say, when mother was right. At least 30 interviews with the mother and her writing, and then of course naturally Shobinda also will come into the picture. Right? So you take your time, you decide, and then we will.
Okay, Kitsuda. Well, thank you for your session today. We're glad to see you back.
Right.
Any more questions, Rishikesh?
No, I want to say again that our classes should continue. I'm sorry that today I could not. I was a little late in joining.
No, the classes will continue. There are already
Yes.
4 or 5 people have said categorically that it should continue. See, for me the number is not important. As long as there is interest, that is enough.
Yes. Yes.
And we'll process this video and get it sent out so you can catch up on what was said earlier.
Yeah,
Sure.
definitely.
Okay. Okay, well, we'll look forward to next Sunday.
Yes,
Yes.
definitely. Right.
Okay.
So good morning to you and good evening to all the others.
Yes, sir. Good evening.
Right.
Good
Okay.
evening. See you next time.
Yeah.